Hi everyone, welcome back. So far, we have understood how an offer is made and how acceptance converts it into an agreement. Now, why do you think the law enforces some promises but ignores a few other? If I say, I promise I'll help you someday, the law does not interfere here. But if I say, I will pay you rupees 5,000 if you complete this work, now the law steps in. What is the difference? The difference is consideration. So remember this clearly. Consideration is the reason why the law enforces a promise. So before jumping into the definition, let us fix the idea in our mind. Consideration means something given, done or promised in return for a promise. It can be money, it can be service, an act, a promise, even not doing something is also considered as consideration. Now, connect this idea with the statutory language. According to section 2 subsection D, consideration exists when, at the desire of the promiser, the promisee or any other person has done or abstained from doing or promises to do or abstain from doing something. That something is nothing but the consideration. Let me give you an example. A says to B, if you teach my child for 1 month, I will pay you rupees 5,000. Now B's teaching is consideration, A's payment is consideration. This is not charity, this is exchange and law recognizes exchange. Let us now examine when consideration is legally acceptable. Firstly, consideration must move at the desire of the promiser. So, this requirement separates requested acts from voluntary acts. What do you mean by this? If the promiser did not ask for the act, then even if the act benefits him, it is not consideration. Example, B, without being asked, repairs A's leaking roof. After seeing the repair, A says, I will pay you rupees 2,000. Does this constitute consideration? No, it is not a consideration. Why? Because never did A desire or request the repair of his leaking roof. So law does not reward unsolicited help. Next, consideration may move from the promisee or any other person. Now, we move to a distinctive feature of Indian law. What is it? The person who gives the consideration may be the promisee himself or may be any third person, but the contract will be still valid. Let's understand this example. A tells B, if C delivers my documents safely, I will pay you rupees 3,000. Now C delivers the documents and A pays to B. This is a valid contract. Why? Because the act was done at A's desire even though C performed it. I hope you understood. Let's now understand the next essential element, that is, consideration may be past, present or future. Think of consideration as connected to time. Let's understand past consideration. Here, an act is completed first and the promise is made later. Let's say B finds A's missing dog and returns it. Later, A promises to give B rupees 500. Now this is a valid consideration in India. Now let's understand what is meant by present consideration. So here the promise and the act happens simultaneously. Example, buying vegetables and paying cash immediately is an example of present consideration. Then what is future consideration? Here both sides promise now, but the performance will happen later. Let's say A agrees to sell his car next month, B agrees to pay after the delivery. Now such a condition or such a consideration is called as future consideration. Now let's understand the next essential element required to constitute a valid consideration, which is nothing but consideration must be real. What do you mean by that? Consideration should have some value in the eyes of law. It need not be money, but it must be capable of being valued. Let's say A promises to pay B rupees 10,000 for being nice with him. Can this be considered as consideration? No, because this is not a real consideration. The next essential element is consideration must be lawful. Law will not enforce an agreement based on illegal or immoral acts. Example, A promises money to B for smuggling the goods. Is this a valid consideration? No, such agreements are void agreements. The next essential element is that consideration need not be adequate. This rule reflects the freedom of contract. Law does not judge the fairness, it only checks free consent. Example, A sells a watch which is worth rupees 2000 only for rupees 500. Is this a valid consideration? Yes, because law is not bothered about the adequacy of consideration. It is only bothered about whether the consideration is lawful and the consent was free. Hence, this example leads to a valid agreement. Now, please note this carefully. Even though consideration may move from a third person, enforcement of contract is restricted only to parties. So remember, stranger to consideration can be valid, but stranger to contract cannot sue and thus cannot be enforced. Now, if we strictly follow the doctrine of privity in all cases, it may sometimes lead to injustice. Therefore, law itself provides certain well-defined exceptions. Now let us understand these exceptions one by one. Firstly, in case of a beneficiary under a trust. So, when a contract creates a trust, the beneficiary of the trust, who is ideally the third party, can still enforce it even though he is not a party to the contract. Example, A transfers property to B in trust for the benefit of C. Here, A and B are parties and C is only a beneficiary, but still C can enforce the trust. Secondly, in case of marriage settlement or agreement and family settlements. So, agreements made in the context of family arrangements are exceptions to the doctrine of privity. Such agreements are intended to benefit family members and denying enforcement would be unfair. For example, a family settlement provides that a certain amount shall be paid to the daughter. Here, the daughter can enforce the agreement. So, in case of acknowledgement or estoppel, what is the case? If a person acknowledges liability towards a third party, he cannot later deny it. So, by his own conduct or statement, he becomes legally bound by the contract. Now, what in case of assignment of contract? In certain cases, the rights under a contract may be assigned to another person. Once assigned, the assignee can enforce the contract. And what in case of contracts through an agent? When an agent enters into a contract on behalf of the principal and the third party can sue each other directly. The agent need not be a party. Thus, while the general rule is that only parties to the contract can sue, law recognizes certain practical situations where third parties must be allowed to enforce their rights. We have repeatedly stated one basic rule of contract law, that is, no consideration equals no contract. But, however, Section 25 of the Indian Contract Act clearly says an agreement made without consideration is void. However, this rule is not absolute. The same section provides specific exceptions where an agreement without consideration is still valid. Let us understand them in a very simple manner. So, firstly, when agreements are made on account of natural love and affection, what happens in such cases? So, an agreement without consideration is still valid if it is made between near relatives, it is in writing, it is registered, and it is based on natural love and affection. Example, a father executes a registered agreement to gift a house to his daughter. Even though the daughter gives nothing in return, the agreement is still valid. Let's next understand what in case of promise to compensate for past voluntary services. So, if a person has voluntarily done something for another and later the other person promises to compensate him, the agreement is valid. Example, A saves B life in an accident. Later B promises to pay A rupees 50,000. This promise is still enforceable. Now what in case of promise to pay a time-barred debt? So, if a debt has become time-barred, it cannot be recovered through court. However, if the debtor makes a written and signed promise to pay such a debt, the agreement becomes valid even without consideration. Now let's understand in case of a completed gift. The rule of no consideration does not apply to completed gifts. Once a gift is given, its validity is not affected by the absence of consideration. Therefore, while consideration is generally essential, the law recognizes human relationships, moral obligations, and past services through carefully defined exceptions. So, this was about the concept of consideration. Thank you. See you in the next session.